Joined now by Dr. Marwan Al-Dawoud, the Leeds Rhinos Head of Medical Services. It's Monday, the 23rd of March. Marwan, great to see you. First of all, how are you keeping, and how's everything going with you?
Yeah, good, thanks. It's obviously a busy time for everybody. There's lots of change, lots of things are happening to our country and worldwide. And it's a busy time for all, really. We're trying to work out how to kind of go through this COVID-19 issue together with the players, the staff, and the wider public. So it's a busy time, and on lots of fronts, trying to balance things. I work in the NHS as well as with the Leeds Rhinos. There's lots of things to balance from the point of view of frontline staff, the NHS, and also the work that we're doing with Rhinos. So it's all up in the air, but there's some clarity in what we need to do moving forward, which hopefully we can provide today.
So let's start with the latest government advice and where we're currently at with what we should be doing, both as the playing staff and the Rhino staff, but also the wider public.
Yeah, so the message is really clear. COVID-19 is coming. We know it's going to get worse, and the message is really clear. As much as possible, we need to all stay at home as much as practically possible. The more we go out and socialise and see people, the more chance there is to be spreading this disease. So the message from the government is really clear, and our Prime Minister was very clear yesterday that all our contact should stop and minimise as much as possible. What that means in practical terms is, if at all possible, work from home. It's understandable. Some jobs will require you to go out, and the government has issued advice about key workers and staff who are critical, such as delivery drivers, healthcare workers, postal services, and there are lots of other people who've been put to that key worker list. But if your job has any flexibility to work from home, then you should be doing. In terms of social gatherings and social distancing, a lot of people use this term social distancing, and it's really important that we can't just, it's difficult at the moment to expect people to stay inside for the foreseeable future. We all need to get some fresh air. We all need to look after our mental health and our physical health. So the government haven't said that you need to stay indoors 24 hours a day. What they're saying is that you can go outside, but if you are going to go outside, then you keep a distance from people. The reason that the government said about this 2 metre minimum distance is because ultimately around everybody are the virus if you have it. So it's to try to limit the spread. So if you're going to go out, then it's important to go out in an area where there's not many people around, and that even the people you're with, that there's a distance between you. And that's the message that we're giving to our staff and our players. With regard to private gatherings, some people have started inviting people around to their houses instead of going outside. Yesterday, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer advised that actually that's probably one of the most likely areas in where you're going to be spreading disease, because you're going to be in close proximity to each other. So again, the message is quite clear to not to have private gatherings in your house. So if you've got some mates coming around, that's not appropriate at this time. But if you wanted to see some friends, go out to a park, provided there aren't any other people that are within close proximity to you. So it's a balance between getting some fresh air, going for a walk, keeping fit, seeing people, but ultimately the message is quite clear: at all possible, stay at home.
And players, obviously, they're fit individuals. They're in the prime of their career. Whilst the coronavirus might not impact them as severely, there is interesting developments on how they could become carriers.
Yeah, so the government issued really clear guidance about people who are elderly, or if they've got other underlying health conditions. And those people are at risk because they're more vulnerable to getting the disease. So we're all vulnerable. Our risk of getting COVID-19 is exactly the same, no matter what your age is. But if you get it and you're older, or you've got other health problems, like for example, you've had previous cancer treatment, or you're on drugs that suppress your immune system, or certain chronic conditions, it's more likely to affect you more severely. With athletes are really fit, healthy people. Their heart rates are really low, their lungs work very efficiently, and they're very good at masking symptoms. And one of our jobs, away from COVID-19, one of our jobs as sports medicine doctors is to recognise when an athlete is unwell, because athletes are really good at coping with disease because they're so fit. So what that can mean with regards to COVID-19 is a lot of athletes or people who are really fit. So this would go, for example, people who do lots of CrossFit or people who are just very fit individuals. They might not experience any symptoms whatsoever, but they're actually carriers of the disease. And if you imagine you're a very fit athlete and you get within close proximity to someone who's more vulnerable, then you could be responsible for making them unwell. And it's got to the point now where it isn't just one-to-one. So you might not walk past a 75-year-old person and make them unwell. You might walk past someone or breathe or cough near someone who also fit, and they might pass on to someone else. So this is this kind of cross kind of fertilization type as well as the virus spreading, which you've got to be really mindful of. And if you're an athlete, there's a particular onus on you as a role model and also as someone who people look to show this message.
And in terms of the players, obviously their livelihood comes from them being fit, strong, and healthy. And when we do get back to normal life after this, they're going to need to do that. What are we doing with the players to make sure they can continue to be able to earn their livelihood afterwards?
Yeah, so the government hasn't said that all work has to stop across the board. We're not into full lockdown as it stands at the moment, unlike Spain and Italy. It's important for all our players to keep fit. So our performance team and our coaching staff have really innovative ways in which players can stay fit at home. So we've given all the players specific programs they can do, but equally so, there's a lot of practical things you can do at home. So a lot of people, even myself included, I've set up a home gym that I can do in wake of gyms closing down. So there's things you can do yourself at home. And even with access to the internet, there are lots of videos online where you can look at tutorials. There's lots of things we can do without going outside. One of the other things that we've done with the players is making sure we do small groups and to absolutely strictly do social distancing. We're offering optional sessions for the players to train, but not in the same sense as what it was a few months ago in the traditional training sense. We've got very small groups, a group of less than 5, and they're all over 2 meters apart that we're offering that they can keep fit and see from the other players. But as I say, those are outside or those are in places where they can keep social distance. So we're trying to make sure that we're offering our physical health for our players, and we're also looking into ways in which we can support our players' mental health, because ultimately that's also an absolutely equal issue with the physical health. Part of that is keeping them kind of seeing people, doing video conferencing, speaking to their friends and their players and their colleagues through video. Some of the players have also been doing some shows. I know that Brad Dwyer's been doing some almost like talk shows, things with some of the players. I think that's really good for physical and mental health to keep them happy, healthy, and fit.
And importantly, you mentioned about the NHS and working there. By doing this social distancing and following the government guidelines, we can enable our wonderful NHS to be able to cope with this medical emergency by not overloading the system.
Yeah, it's very difficult. You know, there's lots of kind of NHS frontline staff. I know personally lots of frontline doctors and nurses who unfortunately are really already struggling. The NHS is already under pressure from the limited cases we have now, and the government fully expects cases to rise rapidly over the next we don't know, maybe a few weeks, just like what's happened in Italy. So as much as we can, what the government's trying to promote the message of is to limit the spread. And the government's message is really powerful, which is that each of us as an individual will actually make a difference. So as on an individual level, the more we isolate ourselves, that's in line with our physical and mental health, the less likely this is going to spread as quickly. But we know it's going to spread, and that will overload the NHS. But the slower the spread, the more the NHS can be prepared to deal with it. And the government has done lots and lots of things, and the government's working overtime extremely hard to make sure the NHS can be in the best place. The government's trying to make sure that PPE equipment, so the protective equipment for staff, is there at the moment. Although they're saying it's there, I know from my staff who are saying it's not there. What they're trying to do is try to delay things so that they can get it there. ventilators. They're purchasing more ventilators. They're doing deals with private hospitals to expand services so that if you're unwell, private hospitals can also take you. These are all things in development, and there have been no official announcements from the government. Although Boris Johnson did allude to the fact that this is what's happening at the moment. So the slower we can delay the spread of coronavirus, it gives the NHS more time to prepare. Because already, as it is, it's already struggling. We want it to be in a better place when it does hit really hard.
So obviously, there's been messages from the government about the self-isolation, and if you live on your own, it's 7 days. If you live in a family, it's 14 days. Explain what the differences are there, Marwan.
Yeah, so I think there's confusion because the advice was different to begin with, and then it went to this interim advice, and now we are where we are now. So as we are today, if you are unwell as an individual, then you self-isolate for 7 days. By unwell, what that means is if you have a new cough that doesn't go away for more than half a day, that's counted as a new persistent continuous cough. And or if your temperature, if you feel that you have a temperature, or you measure it and it's more than 37.8 degrees. There are lots of other things, signs and symptoms, which are more vague. There's been things talked about loss of sense of smell and other things. At the moment, we don't know, but those two signs and symptoms of a cough and a fever are still the two main symptoms. They take up the bulk of people who have coronavirus. So if you have those, you isolate for 7 days, regardless of whether you live alone or with a family. If you live with a family, then the rest of the family have to isolate for 14 days. You as an individual only have to isolate for 7 days. So if you've got the symptoms, whether you live alone or whether you live with a family, you isolate for 7 days, and after that time, your symptoms have settled, you can then remove yourself from self-isolation. But if you live with other people, they have to isolate for 14 days. And the reason for that is because once you've got symptoms, after 7 days, if it's gone, then you're no longer able to pass it on. But what we know about this virus is that a lot of people have the virus and are shedding the virus, but don't have symptoms. And that period can go up to 14 days, which is why you're saying that if you're around someone, so you live with someone who's got symptoms, who's isolating, but you haven't, then you then have to isolate for 14 days. If you haven't had symptoms after 14 days, then you've not picked it up. If you do have symptoms within that 14-day period, as a family member, then you need to isolate yourself for 7 days from when you started symptoms. So it's quite complicated in terms of as a family. So there are graphs and things, and there's different examples about how this might work. But the message is quite clear that if you've got symptoms, you isolate for 7 days, and if you're with a family and if you don't have symptoms, you isolate for 14 days.
And presumably the general advice as well about washing your hands and cleaning surfaces, that stands regardless of whether you have symptoms. But if you had symptoms and after those 7 days you still need to do that, because you could be carrying the virus on your hands, and when you're opening door handles and things like that, you could be spreading it.
Absolutely. I mean, just because if you've got symptoms of cough, cold, fever, and you isolate for 7 days, unfortunately at the moment we don't know whether you've got coronavirus or whether you've just got another virus. One of our players who had symptoms of cough and fever, when we tested him, he didn't have coronavirus, but he had a viral symptoms. That's going to be going on at the same time. So until we get testing, or when the government is going to introduce the finger prick blood test to see whether you've had it in the past, so about what they call the antigen, we're not going to know if you've had it or you haven't had it. So if you've isolated for 7 days with symptoms, and then you go out of isolation, that doesn't mean to say, unfortunately, we don't know whether you've had coronavirus or not. So you might get something else again, and you might have to self-isolate. The advice about washing hands, absolutely. There are a lot of people using alcohol gel and foams, and those things are great, but they don't replace actually washing your hands. So washing your hands with water and soap and washing them really well is absolutely paramount. When you're out and about, touching things in public, which you should be limiting anyway, that's when then you should have an alcohol gel or a foam or something equivalent to clean your hands in between. Other things, like if you're wiping your nose with a tissue or you're sneezing, it should be caught into tissue, and you should catch it and put it in the bin straight away. So you shouldn't be reusing tissues. In terms of surfaces, so if you're going to be out and about and touching things, then you should be cleaning those things after you touch them. A little kind of I'm a father, and in terms of other people who've got children that are going to parks and public places, probably something that's worth talking about. Um, I've stopped my child going to a public park. Doesn't as in equipment. We're going out into a wide space, but you know what children are like. Children will touch everything. They'll lick things. They'll wipe their nose. They'll eat it, and all that kind of stuff. And we know that children are really good carriers because they're not unwell and they do all this stuff, so they're going to be passing it on. So my personal view would be going to a public playground and touching the equipment. I think would be quite high risk for spreading things. So I've personally stopped my child from doing that. It doesn't mean to say we're not going to play football in the park or doing just normal things we would be doing. But I think that's probably an important message. And I think Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish Minister, talked about this yesterday in her address, which our government haven't given specific guidance about. But I think that makes sense to me. And that's certainly what I'd be advising anyone who's got children.
And just on the hand washing, does it need to be antibacterial soap, and does it need to be hot water that you wash it? And presumably, when you're drying your hands afterwards, important not to reuse towels, things that could have the virus on.
Yeah, so it takes me back to first started medical school. Most doctors and medical students do the same thing. They put this powder stuff on our hands, and then it picked up in all the dirty areas. And then what you have to do is you have to wash your hands. And you put it under a UV light box, and you can see what was left of this powder. And we did it with just water, with cold water and soap, and with hot water and soap. The type of soap didn't really make a difference, but obviously you want one that's got antibacterial in. But ultimately, all soaps these days that come from a little plunger, most of them will be antibacterial anyway. But what we found was, on a personal level, was that washing them with warm water and lots of soap, and for a long time, not just a quick kind of rinse, is what got rid of most of the powder stuff. So that'd be the message: warm water, plenty of soap, making sure you're getting all the areas you wouldn't think of. So in between your fingers and these bits here, your thumb, just the back of your hand here. These are the kind of areas you often forget to do. Most of us will do our palms really well, but actually the other sides you probably forget, in between the fingers, the nails. Making sure the ends of the fingers are clean all really well. Absolutely, if you've got a kitchen towel that most of us will use a towel in the kitchen, if you reuse and you're using it, washing your hands several times a day, that's going to be picking up infection as well. So I'll be encouraging people to use single-use kitchen roll to dry your hands with, put it in the bin. That way you're absolutely limiting spread.